What if the history you were taught in school, that clean, sterile version, omitted the existence of beings who, according to humanity's oldest accounts, were never supposed to be here? Beings whose mere mention struck terror, and whose inexplicable remains, if truly studied, would dismantle much of what you believe to be reality. The ancestral fear of colossal beings isn't just folklore. It pulses through the veins of every culture and every civilization that has ever walked this earth. And the Bible, the most read and contested book in history, doesn't just mention these giants. It places them at the center of a war that transcends time and space. If you are ready to unearth truths that have been buried under layers of interpretation and occultism, then subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This is an invitation for you to join a select group of seekers who are not afraid to confront the impossible. Now, close your eyes for a second and imagine an Earth that was still young. Not as we know it today, but a place where the line between the natural and the supernatural was thin, almost non-existent. The sky wasn't the vibrant blue we see now, but a heavy gray shroud, as if the atmosphere itself carried the weight of an imminent corruption. The vegetation was dense and wild, with forests so ancient they seemed to hold millennial secrets within their twisted roots. An unsettling sensation hung in the air, the feeling that something was always watching humanity from above, observing and manipulating. It was an era where the ethical and moral boundaries of creation were dissolving. In Genesis chapter 6, the Bible paints a disturbing picture. When men began to multiply on the face of the ground and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. This isn't a romance. It is the ignition point of one of the greatest biblical mysteries: the forbidden crossing between the divine and the earthly. It is essential that we understand deeply what these colossi truly were, for their origin defies modern logic. While there are various schools of thought, one of the most fascinating interpretations suggests that the sons of God were celestial beings, or watchers, who abandoned their original dwelling in the spiritual realm. What occurred was not a simple marriage, but a forbidden incursion where these beings materialized to mingle with the daughters of men. The result of this unnatural union was not just an ordinary birth, but a genetic profanation without precedent: the emergence of the Nephilim. From the Hebrew, the term means the fallen ones, or those who cause others to fall. They were hybrid beings, creatures that carried in their DNA a strength and intelligence that did not belong to this world. They were anomalies that were not part of the original design of creation, and their existence introduced a corruption to Earth that affected not only human morality but the very biology of life itself. It is important to note, however, that this is only one of the primary biblical views on the subject. Another line of interpretation suggests that the sons of God were the godly lineage of Seth, Adam's son, who became corrupted by uniting with the rebellious lineage of Cain. Yet, when we look at the sheer terror these beings caused and the necessity for a radical intervention like the flood, the hybrid beings' view gains a disturbing weight. If they were indeed a seed foreign to humanity, it explains why the scriptures place such emphasis on the purification of the earth. The creation of these giants was not an act of God, but an attempt to sabotage the future of mankind. They were the Gibborim, the ancient tyrants who used their stature to enslave and destroy, turning the world into a laboratory of violence. Understanding this origin is key to knowing why we need to understand this now. The biblical war was not just a dispute over territory. It was a biological and spiritual war for the purity of the human bloodline. To understand the Nephilim is to understand that there is a project of corruption aimed at distorting the image of God in man since the very beginning. The first clues that this genetic corruption was a real threat culminated in the flood. Noah, perfect in his generations, was the guarantee that humanity would have a new start. But then, a disturbing clue emerges. How did the giants reappear after the flood? The Bible mentions them again in Numbers 13, in the report of Moses' spies in Canaan. And there we saw the Nephilim, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them. This image shatters confidence. The self-perception of being insignificant beings in the presence of colossi. The corrupted DNA had somehow survived, either through new incursions or persistent genetic traits. This leads us to a common false conclusion: the theory that they were just tall men. Break that idea right now. We aren't talking about athletes, but about warriors whose endurance and ferocity paralyzed entire armies. Their fortresses were impenetrable, and their mere presence was enough to make legions of experienced soldiers tremble. The tension increases drastically during the conquest of the Promised Land. Imagine the Hebrews facing cities inhabited by these beings. It is in this setting that the name of Caleb shines. Though elderly, he possessed the vigor of a young man, and he asked for Hebron, the stronghold of the giants, the sons of Anak. The risk here was immense. If Caleb failed, the lineage of the Messiah would be in danger. Hebron could not remain contaminated. The giants were the final obstacle to the full possession of the divine inheritance. And the turning point comes with Goliath. The story you know is David versus the giant, but the ignored detail is that Goliath was not alone. He had 4 brothers. The threat was a surviving bloodline that still sought to dominate the world of men. David's victory was only the signal that God was raising up men to finish the work that began at the flood. The climax of this saga explodes in the final hunt, where David's mighty men faced the last remnants of these colossi. Warriors like Abishai and Sibbecai struck down beings with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. Monstrosities who wielded spears weighing nearly 20 pounds. Every fall was the annihilation of the last vestige of a corruption that dared to challenge the Creator. The mystery is finally resolved. God's victory through ordinary men cleansed the earth. The human lineage was preserved, and the path to the Messiah was made secure. The world now belongs to those who trust in the Most High, not those who trust in their own stature. If you felt the depth of this revelation, leave a comment with the word giants. But one last touch of mystery remains. If this war was so real, could it be that the walls and fears we face today are spiritual reflections of these ancient enemies? Could there still be secrets buried beneath our cities, waiting for the right time to be revealed? The enemy changes shape, but the strategy of making us feel like grasshoppers remains the same. Which giant are you ready to take down in your life today?